told you love doesn't just fade away, it can actually die. And not just in one way, but in two totally different and kind of surprising ways. We're diving into some notes from a relationship therapist today about how love dies. And let me tell you, get ready for some serious aha moments.
It's funny you should put it that way, because what I find so interesting about this therapist's take is how they differentiate between love's slow decline and then, it's straight up a sudden death.
Okay, so are we talking like a slow burn versus a sudden implosion? And what does that even feel like, the slow death of love in a relationship?
Well, imagine this, right? It's like those small hurts we talked about before. Feeling unseen or undervalued by your partner, like even your core values are being chipped away at bit by bit, and they just build up over time.
Almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? You become numb to it after a while.
Exactly, and that's when you start to feel like that ghost the therapist talks about. It's as if you're becoming transparent to your partner, you know what I mean? Like they're looking right through you.
Ugh, emotionally transparent. That's rough. And listener, have you ever felt that way in a relationship, where you just kind of blend into the background?
It's definitely a powerful image, and I think it speaks to this, almost insidious process of indifference that the therapist keeps coming back to. In fact, they actually say that it's not hate that kills love, but indifference.
Really? Why is indifference more corrosive than, say, just anger? It seems like if you're fighting, at least there's still some fire there, right?
Well, think of it this way. Anger, even when it's really heated, it still suggests that you care on some level, The other person can still evoke a strong reaction from you. But indifference is apathy. It's that emotional detachment.
So it's not even that you're not seeing your partner, it's that you're no longer feeling anything for them, good or bad.
Exactly. And that emptiness, that void where the connection and the passion used to be, that's what truly eats away at a relationship's foundation.
Okay, so if indifference is like the slow poison that kills love, then what about that other side of things, the quick death? How does love just up and vanish seemingly overnight?
Well, the therapist actually uses the phrase quick death of disappointment. And it generally seems to happen when a certain ideal gets totally shattered.
And that's often because of a really fundamental value being violated, right?
Exactly.
Like they talk a lot about infidelity being a prime example.
Yeah, and they actually make a really interesting point about that, because they say it's not always about the actual act itself, but what that act ends up revealing about your partner, about their character, about their deeper values as a person. It's like suddenly the ground beneath you crumbles and you're like, wait, do I even know this person as well as I thought I did?
It's like those non-negotiables, right? Those lines you just don't cross in a relationship. And then to find out that, maybe what you thought was so rock solid is actually pretty shaky.
Yeah, for sure. And that ties back into what the therapist was saying about the importance of following your gut. Because if you constantly find yourself explaining away those red flags or just minimizing your own discomfort, then, that's probably a sign that something's not quite right.
And we're all really good at rationalizing things, especially when, we really don't want to face the hard truth.
Oh, absolutely. We're masters at it. You start convincing yourself, it's not that big a deal, or they'll change, or whatever it is. But what the therapist suggests is that those gut feelings, they're usually there to tell us something really important, about our own values, our own boundaries.
And that's what I find so interesting about what the therapist says about admiration. Almost like you can't love someone you don't admire, at least in some capacity. Is it really that black and white?
Right. Because it really makes you think, what kind of admiration are we even talking about here? They actually talk about how there are different forms of admiration.
Yeah.
You could admire someone for, say, their skills. Maybe they're an amazing artist or a talented musician. But thinking about it, that type of admiration, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn into romantic love.
So what's the difference then? What's the kind of admiration that actually makes love last?
It seems like what the therapist is getting at is that for love to really stick around, it requires a much deeper level of admiration. One that goes beyond just surface level stuff. Like you admire their character, their values, how they move through the world. It's about having a deep respect for who they are at their core.
So it's about really admiring who someone is at their core, not just the things they can do or their accomplishments, right? Which makes sense, but I don't know, it's kind of daunting when you really think about it.
It is, because it forces you to get real with yourself and ask, okay, what are the qualities I actually find admirable in a partner? Like for me personally.
Yeah.
And then are those qualities actually present in, my relationship right now?
Right. And maybe even more importantly, can those qualities actually last? through thick and thin, because, let's be honest, no one's perfect, and all relationships are going to have their ups and downs.
And that's where things get super interesting because, like this therapist is saying, that when that really deep core admiration starts to fade, well, it can be incredibly hard to bring back that, spark of love.
It's almost like you're starting from a place of disillusionment, right? Like we talked about earlier, that foundation, it's already got cracks in it.
Exactly. And that goes back to why this therapist is placing so much emphasis on self-awareness right from the get-go. If you understand your own values and you know what you're willing to compromise on and what you're not willing to compromise on, well, then you can actually build a relationship where love has a chance.
It's like that saying, know thyself, right? If you don't know what you need and want in a partner, how can you ever expect to find it?
Exactly. And how can you possibly create a dynamic, a relationship where both of you feel truly seen, valued, and admired for who you really are? Because it sounds like, that mutual admiration is kind of the secret ingredient here.
I think you're right, especially based on everything we've talked about today. So listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. What qualities do you find deeply admirable in a partner? And we're talking like the kind of admiration that really goes beneath the surface. And then how can you nurture those qualities, not only in your relationships, but also in yourself?